Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why, and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of UPSC examination. Today we have taken up important news and articles from The Hindu and the Indian Express newspaper New Delhi edition dated 6th October 2023. Topics for today's discussion are displayed on your screen. Let's begin the discussion. So, inspiration for the first topic of today's discussion comes from this news article which featured on page number 10 of the Indian Express newspaper. Article majorly focuses on unpaid domestic and agricultural labor by rural women, which has been ignored for too long. Now, as per the author of the articles, as the International Day of Rural Women approaches, it is disheartening to note that India not only recorded one of the lowest female labor force participation rate, that is LFPR, in the world, but that it was also lower than other South Asian countries except the case of Afghanistan and Pakistan. So if we will look into the General Studies paper 1 syllabus, role of women and women organization have been mentioned. Apart from this, GS paper 2 talks about the social justice and vulnerable section of the population, which includes women. If you will look into the previous year UPSC question in 2023 itself, UPSC has asked a 15 marker question which says distinguish between care economy and monetized economy. How can care economy be brought into monetized economy through women empowerment? As the main focus of this news article is about unpaid care work, in today's discussion, we will be taking up aspects like need for recognition of unpaid care work, benefits of such recognition, challenges lying in the recognition of such work, and various measures that have been suggested to mitigate the same. So let's begin our discussion. So before moving on to any discussion, let us understand the key term, that is unpaid care work. And for that, we have segregated each and every word. What we understand by unpaid: an activity which is not remunerated, for which you are not or one is not getting paid. Care relates to the activities which are necessary for the health and well-being. And work, the activity involves mental or physical efforts, mental in terms of emotion and planning aspect. And these activities are costly in terms of time resources. To sum it up, we can define unpaid care work in words of OECD, which says it refers to all unpaid services within a household for its members, including care of persons, housework, and voluntary community work. These activities are considered as work because theoretically one could pay a third person to perform them. For example, if you are hiring a nurse for care of elderly, or you are hiring a maid for cooking purpose or cleaning purpose, etc. So what happens, in spite of hiring, we assume that homemaker ladies or female workers are destined to do such jobs, and we circumvent the payment process. The traditional Indian imagination of a household almost takes it for granted that certain jobs within the household are to be performed only by women. These tasks can include domestic upkeep, cooking, cleaning, and childcare, etc. So to better understand the gravity of situation in India, let us take an example. Now, according to the census in 2011, people engaged in household duties have been treated as non-workers, even when around 160 million women, that is 159.9 million women, stated that household work was their main occupation. Even then, they were categorized as non-worker. In its report, the International Monetary Fund, that is IMF, also suggested that if women participation in the economy was raised to that of men, then India could grow its GDP by 27%. So now when we have understood the concept of unpaid work, its gravity and its potential if the care work gets recognized, let us move on to the discussion on the part that what is the need of recognition of care work. Now, the first reason for recognition of unpaid care work is the misestimation of economic activity. Now, non-inclusion of unpaid care work in national accounting statistics like GDP grossly misestimates the level of economic activity. Because as you have seen previously that IMF has suggested that it can boost the GDP by 27%. Now such a chunk you are ignoring in your calculation, then how can you estimate your economic activity in a correct manner? Now second reason is female labor participation. Now the burden of unpaid care work on women limits their skill development and employment opportunity. This has resulted in a low level of female labor force participation. Now, to understand this, let us take one explanation of ILO, that is International Labour Organization, which has coined a term that is time poverty. Now, what is it? Now, ILO estimates that unpaid care work is amongst the most critical barrier preventing women from joining and remaining in the workforce. This disproportionate burden of unpaid care work creates what is called time poverty, which inhibits women's ability to dedicate time to paid work and acquire the skills necessary to seek better job opportunities. And this experience is not unique to India. Globally, in 2016, 46.7% of women attributed their absence from the workforce to domestic duties, as compared to only 6.3% of men. Another reason why there is a need for recognition of unpaid care work is the wage gap. Often, domestic care work by women is treated as unproductive and it is reflected in low wages for women in labor market when compared to men. Let us understand this by the example given in article itself. Now, if we consider rural women, now as you know, ratio of self-employed women have seen a rise in rural area, mainly owing to their employment in agriculture sector. Now, these self-employed women receive less than half of men's earning, indicating a higher gender earning gap as compared to other categories of worker. Now, as we have seen needs, let us look into the benefits when we will look into the income or the aspect of unpaid care work. Now, as we have seen in need that estimation of economic activity cannot be achieved. So, when we will do this, recognition of economic contribution of women can be actualized. Measuring household work can recognize women's significant contribution to the economy, highlighting the economic value of unpaid domestic services and their role in the country's economy. Now, second benefit would be the better policy formulation. Data on women's household work time can inform policy making, leading to more targeted policies for women and their families in areas such as health, education, and employment. Now, another benefit lies in the improved economic planning. The measurement of household work can help in improved economic planning and decision making. This can provide policymakers with more complete picture of the economy and help them make more informed decision. And lastly, measuring household chores as part of GDP can empower women by recognizing their work as valuable economic activity, leading to increased labor force participation rate, better wages, and working conditions. So, the measurement of household chores performed by women can help in recognizing the value of women's unpaid work and enable policymakers to design more targeted policies for women's economic empowerment. So, now as we have seen that there is a need and there are benefits. So, why it is not being done? Answer lies in the challenges. Challenges in what sense? Challenges in calculating unpaid labor work. So, the first challenge is perception of work itself. Now, unpaid care work is often not considered work in the traditional sense. For instance, a mother caring for her children or a spouse looking after an elderly partner may not view these responsibilities as work, despite the significant time and effort involved. Consequently, when surveys ask about work, respondents may exclude care activities from their responses, leading to underreporting. Another reason is subjectivity and variation. Now, the nature of care work varies widely and can be highly subjective. Consider the task of cooking meals. One person might cook 3 meals a day from scratch, while another might use pre-packaged food, making it challenging to standardize measurement. Now, both are cooking. How would you measure the amount of labor or the work that has been gone into the cooking process? Additionally, caregiving responsibilities changes over time. Caring for a toddler differs from caring for a teenager, making it difficult to capture the full spectrum of care work. Now, another issue is invisible labor. Much of care work is invisible. Now think about emotional support or mental labor like planning and organizing and managing family dynamics. These are essential components of caregiving but often go unnoticed. For example, a caregiver may spend hours coordinating doctors' appointments and managing medications, which are critical aspect of care, but not easily quantifiable. Another issue is seasonality. Now, care work can vary seasonally. Consider holiday preparation. The workload for cooking, decorating, and gift giving increases significantly during certain times of the year, like we can take example of Deepavali or New Year. These fluctuations make it challenging to capture the consistent level of care work throughout the year. Another issue is cultural differences. Now, cultural norms significantly impact how care work is perceived and distributed within household. For example, in some cultures, extended family members often share caregiving responsibility, while in others, it may fall primarily on women. Now, these cultural variations complicate efforts to standardize such calculation. Now, collecting data is another challenge. Traditional data collection methods like surveys may not fully capture care work. Respondents may forget or underestimate the time spent on caregiving, especially if it is a continuous fragmented task. They may also not recognize certain caregiving activities as work, as we have already talked about in the first point, that is perception of work. Now, this will also lead into inaccurate reporting. Now, last but not the least, valuation of care work is itself a challenge. Assigning a monetary value to care work is complex. For example, estimating the economic value of a stay-at-home parent's contributions involves considering factors like the cost of hiring childcare, cooking, cleaning, and emotional support. These intangible contributions are challenging to quantify accurately. Now, to summarize this, and apart from question of implementation, the questions like who pays, in what form, who gets it, and how much. These questions raise other issues regarding social implications and unintended consequences, whether it would further perpetuate the patriarchal and caste inequalities. So, addressing these challenges requires a holistic approach, which includes the steps which will ultimately deburden the women from the care work. First is investment in time-saving technologies like infrastructure of electrification, improved access to water, public transport, etc. It will save their time and will reduce their physical labor. Another is better access to public services like childcare and care for the elderly. Another measure is provision for maternity benefits to informal sector labor. As we all know, women participation in labor force mostly lies in the informal sector. Another suggestion is equal amount of maternity and paternity leaves. Further, tackling entrenched social norms and gender stereotypes can defeminize the caregiving. You can further use ILO's, that is International Labour Organization's 5R framework for decent care work, which includes recognize, reduce, redistribute, reward, and representation to empower women and transform the care economy. And ILO has suggested following strategies to achieve the same. Now, the first is recognition. Now, recognition is one of the most central process in empowerment. And for more than 150 million women in the country, the recognition of their primary occupation as genuine work that contributes not only to the family but to the welfare of the nation state as a whole is such that it gives them a claim to equality within the patriarchal Indian household that only recognizes the work done by men. India can learn from Colombia's care economy law, which is based on the premise of recognition of care economy. Another strategy that ILO suggests is adequate investment in care infrastructure such as pre-primary education, health, electricity, drinking water, LPG connection, etc. Now, to sense the impact of such action, we can take an example that additional 2% investment would create around 11 million additional jobs in India. A 2007 analysis by the Women's Budget Group found that if an additional 2% of GDP were invested in Indian health and care sector, the country would generate 11 million additional jobs, and nearly one-third of it would go to the women. Now, central and state governments must actively invest in building care infrastructure and the provision of care services to reduce the burden of unpaid care work on women, enabling their economic participation. Further strategy includes social protection policies. which talks about tax deductions of care-related expenses by the households for formalization of domestic workers, and providing for the cash transfer to women so that they can purchase child care services from domestic workers. Another strategy relates to promoting active labor market policies, which talks about paid maternity leave, efficient implementation of public works programs such as Manrega, enhance skill set through vocational training and retraining to enhance employability, providing gender sensitive work environments such as reduced or flexible working hours, and lastly, promoting women led SHGs. Now, very important strategy that includes redistribution. Government must support NGOs and private sector to care for the children and elderly through old age homes and pre-primary schools. So the discussed strategies can contribute in meeting various sustainable development goals like goal number 1, which focuses on ending the poverty. Goal number 3, which relates to healthy lives. Goal number 4, which talks about inclusive and equitable quality education. Goal number 5, which talks about gender equality. And goal number 6, which talks about ensuring availability and sustainable management. So the next topic of today's discussion is based on this data point which featured on page number 12 of the Hindu newspaper. Now, source of this data is United Nations Population Fund and its report, which was published in the year 2023 and was named as India Aging Report. Now, this data point specifically covers data related to the old women, that is elderly women, and it highlights that the 30% of elderly women have difficulty getting out of the bed, while 25% find it tough to take bath and eat without assistance. Further, the data says that less than 25% of elderly women are aware of government schemes and concessions. Apart from this, report also highlights that as life expectancy for women are higher than men, there are more chances of seclusion and loneliness in the elderly age. Though this data point mainly focuses on data related to old women, here in this discussion we will be covering the challenges associated with the elderly population and recommendation for the mitigation of the same. As you can refer in GS paper 2 syllabus, welfare schemes for vulnerable section has been mentioned, and aging population or elderly population forms a large chunk of it and going to be even larger in future. Further, if you will see previous year UPSC question, UPSC in 2020 has asked a question based on geriatric population. Question says, in order to enhance the prospects of social development, sound and adequate healthcare policies are needed, particularly in the fields of geriatric and maternal health care. So here in this discussion we will be covering, so let's begin the discussion. So before moving on to discuss challenges and way forward, let us quickly look into the key findings of the report regarding the elderly population. Firstly, the report estimated a decadal growth rate of 41% for the elderly population in India, and by 2050, the elderly population will make up over 20% of India's total population. Further, by 2046, it is expected that elderly population will surpass the population of children aged up to 15. Further, the report says that more than 40% of India's elderly population is in the poorest wealth quintile, and around 18.7% of them live without any income, and with such level of poverty, it may affect their quality of life and healthcare utilization. Women on average had higher life expectancy at the age of 60 and at 80 when compared to men, with variations across states and UTs. In Rajasthan, Haryana, Gujarat, Uttarakhand, Kerala, Himachal Pradesh and Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, women aged 60 can expect to live more than 20 additional years. Now, most states in the southern region and select northern states such as Himachal Pradesh and Punjab reported a higher share of elderly population than the national average in 2021, a gap that is expected to widen by 2036. Now, the UNFPA report, that is India Aging Report, used data from 2011 census and the longitudinal aging survey of India, that is LASI survey of 2017 and 18. It has also used data from the World Population Projection 2022 report. Now, details regarding these reports, which are important from the perspective of prelims examination, has been provided in the PDF format, for which link has been provided in the description box. Now, let us discuss the challenges faced by the elderly population. First is ruralization of elderly population. Now, according to the census of 2011, on an average, 71% of elderly population live in rural areas, with significant inter-regional variation, ranging from 62 to 63% in west and south, while a larger chunk lives, that is 78 to 80% of elderly population in east, north and northeast India lives in rural areas. Further, it leads to feminization of elderly population. Now, women living longer than men, resulting in higher levels of widowhood and associated socio-cultural and economic deprivation and dependencies. Further, it leads to economic challenges also. More than 40% of India's elderly population is in the poorest wealth, and around 18.7% live without income, making it hard for them to have a good life and get the health care they need. Income insecurity is one of the major causes of vulnerability, especially in old age. Another challenge lies in disease prevalence. Over 30% of elderly women and 28% of men suffered from one chronic morbid condition, and nearly one fourth, that is 25%, suffered from more than two morbid conditions. With the increasing age, the share in such conditions gradually increases. Another challenge lies in the depression. Mental illness arising from senility, showing poor mental ability because of old age and neurosis. Depression was observed to increase with age in approximately 8% of older individuals, and it was more prevalent among elderly women. Further, there is a challenge of less awareness and hindrance in receiving social security schemes. Only 29% of the elderly benefit from various social security schemes. Now, having seen the challenges, let us have a look into the recommendations as provided by the UNFPA. Firstly, it says that government must work on increasing awareness about schemes for older persons. It also talks about need for bringing all old age homes under regulatory purview of the government. Further, it recommends the government to encourage the creation and running of elderly self-help groups, and stressed the importance of having elderly people live in multi-generational household. Further, it says that government should encourage in situ, that is at home aging, as much as possible by creating short-term care facilities like creches, daycare facilities, etc. And for this, it cited that it is possible to have better care when elderly people live with their respective families. Further, it says a multitude of government schemes and policies addressing the health, financial empowerment, and capacity building needs of the elderly population. It also talks about community-based organizations actively engaged in digital empowerment through computer and internet usage session. It further suggests corporate efforts for joyful aging, social assistance, old age homes, and elder abuse awareness campaigns. Lastly, it suggests ministerial committees dedicated to shaping policy for elderly welfare. Addressing these challenges often requires a combination of family support, community resources, healthcare services, and public policy initiatives to ensure that the elderly population can age with dignity and quality of life. So let us take up the next part of our discussion, which will be focused from the perspective of prelims examination. And the inspiration for the first discussion in this section comes from this news, which featured on page number 1 of the Hindu newspaper. Now, John Fosse, who is from Norway, won the Nobel Prize in Literature. His plays are among the most widely staged playwright in the world. Now, if you will look into the preliminary examination syllabus, current events of national and international importance have been mentioned. Apart from this, UPSC has also asked questions based on important awards and development at the international arena. So let's begin our discussion. So Mr. John Fosse is known for his innovative plays and prose giving voice to the unsayable. That means his write-ups act as a conduit between the vulnerable section and other sections of the population, including the political establishments. His works are written in Norwegian Ninox language, covering number of genres including plays, novels, poetry, essays, and children's book. His latest book, that is Septology, is a semi-autobiographical work. An interesting fact is that third volume of this book was also nominated for 2022 Booker Prize. And just for the quick revision, in 2022, French feminist icon Annie Ernaux was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. Moving further, let us have a quick look in Nobel Prize in Literature itself. It is awarded by the Swedish Academy based in Stockholm, Sweden. It is one of the 5 Nobel Prizes established by the will of Mr. Alfred Nobel in the year 1895. It is awarded annually since 1901 to an author from any country in the field of literature who is producing the most outstanding work in an idealistic direction. Another fact which is important from the perspective of Indian history is Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore was the first Indian who received first Nobel Prize in Literature in the year 1913 for his collections Geetanjali, which was published in London in the year 1912. He was also the first non-Westerner to receive this prize. Now the next news, which is important from the prelims perspective, featured on page number 17 of the Hindu newspaper. News is about the first nuclear power plant of the Bangladesh, for which the first shipment of Russian uranium was officially delivered to Bangladesh to fuel its only nuclear power plant, which is situated in Rooppur. And why this news is important? Because the Rooppur Project is the first initiative under an Indo-Russian deal to undertake atomic energy projects in third countries. So as you can see your GS paper 2 syllabus under the topic of international relations, India and its neighborhood relation. Apart from this, bilateral, regional and global groupings and agreements involving India or affecting India's interest have been mentioned. Apart from this news article also talks about IAEA, that is International Atomic Energy Agency, which becomes important from this subpart of the syllabus that talks about important international institutions, agencies and their structure and mandate. So let's begin our discussion. So let us quickly look into the project itself. Now this project, that is Rooppur nuclear power plant, is being built on the eastern bank of the river Ganga, which is around 160 km from Dhaka. It is Bangladesh's first nuclear power plant. Now, International Atomic Energy Agency is supporting the South Asian country in the safe, secure and sustainable introduction of nuclear power. So another dimension which becomes important from this news is the facts related to International Atomic Energy Agency. It is an intergovernmental forum for scientific and technical cooperation in the nuclear field. It was created in the year 1957. In response to the deep fears and expectations generated by the discoveries and diverse uses of nuclear technology. It works for the safe, secure and peaceful uses of nuclear science and technology, contributing to international peace and security and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, that is SDGs. Now another important aspect is IAEA's milestone approach. What is it? It enables a sound development process for a nuclear power program. It is phased comprehensive method to assist countries that are considering or planning their first nuclear power plant, and this is true for the Bangladesh in this case, and that is why IAEA is assisting. The headquarters of IAEA is located in Vienna in Austria. Now UPSC asked a question based on International Atomic Energy Agency, that is IAEA, in the year 2018. It says, in the Indian context, what is the implication of ratifying the additional protocol with the International Atomic Energy Agency? Option A, the civilian nuclear reactor come under IAEA safeguard. The military nuclear installations come under the inspection of IAEA. The country will have the privilege to buy uranium from nuclear supplier group. The country automatically becomes a member of the NSG, that is nuclear supplier group. Now the correct answer for this question is option A, that is the civilian nuclear reactors will come under IAEA safeguards. The inspiration for the last topic of this section comes from this news which featured on page number 11 of the Hindu newspaper. News is related to Rashtriya Vigyan Pruskar. Now, as we know that Union government has instituted the Rashtriya Vigyan Pruskar to honor scientists and innovators. The new Rashtriya Vigyan Pruskar will replace the long-running Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar prizes given by CSIR since 1960. However, unlike Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award that carried prize money, the new Rashtriya Vigyan Pruskar award will have no monetary component, similar to the Padma Awards. The move by the government comes nearly a year after it decided to reduce the number of annual science prizes given by its ministries. While RVP aims to felicitate scientists and technologists, the lack of prize money marks a shift from decade-old Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award traditions. So let us quickly look the important details related to this award. So what is it? Now, the Government of India has established the Rashtriya Vigyan Puraskar, which is a prestigious set of national accolades bestowed to individuals in recognition of their outstanding contributions to the domains of science, technology, and innovation. Now, these two information are important. The announcement of these prizes is scheduled to take place annually on the 11th May. And why it is important? Because it coincides with the National Technology Day. That is, on the same date, India conducted its second nuclear test in Pokhran, Rajasthan in 1998. And this day was declared as National Technology Day. Similarly, the presentation of all categories of prizes is scheduled to take place on August 23. Now, why it is important? Because on this date, India's Chandrayaan-3 mission was successful and landed on South Pole of the Moon, which was declared as National Space Day. Further important information from examination perspective is the categories of this award, which includes Vigyan Ratna, Vigyan Shri, Vigyan Yuva Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar, which is aimed to promote younger scientists of age up to 45 years. Whereas, as the name suggests, Vigyan team, this award will be given to a team comprising 3 or more members. Another very important information with this awards is that eligibility criteria for new awards will extend to the people of Indian origin also, that is PIOs. However, it is important to note that only one PIO will be eligible for the Vigyan Ratna, while 3 PIOs may be picked for both Vigyan Shri and Vigyan Yuva Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar. However, PIOs will not meet the eligibility criteria for Vigyan Team Award. So that's all for today's session. Stay tuned for more such updates.